I'm Karina Rykman with ToneConcepts, and I'm here in Brooklyn at Jim Campilongo's house with Jim Campilongo. How's it going, Jim?
It's going great. Good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having us here. This is going to be fun. So first thing I want to just talk about, it's always good to hear about beginnings. I want to hear about just the developmental years from when you started playing guitar to when you first started playing live. Can you talk about that just a bit?
Sure. I mean, it kind of happened fast because I think I started playing guitar in like 73 or 74.
Nice.
And my sisters, I had older sisters who were always listening to pretty good music. I mean, incredible string band and Dan Hicks and Hendrix, the Beatles, Bob Dylan and stuff like that. And I heard it, through the wall. I mean, we weren't really close because I think they were 4 years older than me,
right.
So a big difference. But, I heard the music and eventually started getting a record or two. The first record I got was a Jimi Hendrix Greatest Hits, which I still have. Is that
the same one?
The same one, yeah. And I ended up getting some pretty good records, and I couldn't just, but I really loved guitar. And I was about 12, I think. And it took me about 2 years to get up the guts, and the guy across the street from me had this green stamp acoustic where, if you went and got gas or whatever, they'd give you these stamps that you could redeem and get a toaster or a waffle iron or something like that, or a guitar. And he had one of those guitars and he gave it to me, and I started taking lessons, and it took me a couple of years to be able to, play. I mean, how it is. It takes you about 6 months before you can make a bar chord.
Sure.
Stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But there were so many bands at the time, and I think it took me about 2 years before I was actually like playing with a really good drummer who I ended up making a few records with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
So who just lived down the street from me, and we were all really passionate about music.
That's so fun. And then that was in San Francisco, is that right?
That was in San Francisco, yeah.
Right. What was the scene like back then for young musicians like yourself trying to get out there?
It was great.
Was it?
I mean, I felt like everybody played guitar. It was almost like the computer of today.
Sure.
Like people now trade apps, or you're on Instagram, or it's kind of a slightly creative aspect of one's lives, and cooked in with technology. Well, when I was 14, like everybody played Harvest by Neil Young.
Sure,
like everybody. Or there was this one Yes song too. Everybody knew the intro. Obviously I didn't. Or
Roundabout?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Probably it.
And you're right, it was Roundabout. How do you know?
Because that's one that has continued
still
on. You go to Guitar Center, it doesn't stop with the Roundabout.
And the Paranoid, the Black Sabbath. I mean, everybody played guitar, and then there were people that took it seriously, or just obsessively.
Sure.
And there was bands, there was drummers, there was bass players. I lived in a suburbia, so there was garages, and then there was gigs. I did my first gig. I played 6 months,
Wow.
and I did a bluegrass gig and played, G, C, and D, and with these guys. And a couple of years later, I was playing Doobie Brothers and stuff like that. So it was very conducive to playing and not having to be a virtuoso, or not having to, get a lot of people at your gigs.
Sure.
Because there was gigs everywhere, and all the bars had bands.
Right. Well, that's great. Were you playing with people who were fundamentally better than you at the beginning?
Pretty much always.
Right?
I was lucky that way, and I was really young. I mean, I was 15 years old.
Sure.
And I remember, I haven't thought about this guy in a long, long time, but I met this guy named Glenn from New York, and he was really into the Allman Brothers, and he showed me a lot. Like at the time, I really wasn't very proficient in a major key.
Sure.
I could play, you know, B.B. King and all that kind of stuff, and rock, and I was really into Cream, but and he kind of I think there was a song Blue Skies.
Oh yeah.
And he knew it note for note, and I remember that was just a revelation. And moving the pentatonic scale down a step and a half, and it's
and the harmony portion in that song, you know,
you know everything.
Hey, I've seen Allman Brothers.
You're amazing. But you know, and so he taught me a lot, and then I met a few other people, and I think a real breakthrough happened when I was about 17, and I met this guy named Michael Frost. And he was 28, and at the time I just thought he was like, you know, Abraham Lincoln or something, you know. I mean, I was like, why are you even attempting to be in the music business? You're 28, you know. Now it seems so goofy, but all that said, and I was so wrong, you know. He was a young guy, and he was really good, but I remember not consciously knowing what it is, but learning how to swing.
Right. And that was groundbreaking.
That was groundbreaking. So, you know, and so it went in increments like that, because I never went to music school or anything.
Right.
But there was plenty of opportunity and plenty of people to learn from.
Sure. Well, personally, I think you learn so much more playing with people at a higher level than you throwing yourself into these situations than you ever would, you know, in music school. Personally, I don't know. I think
you're right.
Yeah. So that's interesting stuff. But at that time, when you first started, your whole thing is the Fender Princeton and the Telecaster. Was that what you were playing then?
No, I mean, both those, the Princeton especially came much later. It came when I moved to New York.
Oh, okay.
I mean, but I always played Fender amps.
Oh.
The first good electric I got was a Gibson 330.
Okay.
And the first good amp I got was a Fender Twin, and I had that amp for about 20 years. And then from the Gibson 330, I got a Gibson Les Paul, a Sunburst. I got it, probably things worth $1 gazillion. Slash probably owns it now. And I immediately got, I had that about a month, and I got this, I fell in love with this 54 Les Paul and traded for it. That had single coil pickup. So I played Gibsons for a while, but I always played Fender amps. And I remember, you know, then the 80s started happening, and Fender stuff was kind of passé.
Right.
Especially like the amps. I mean, there was Lab Series and Galley & Kruger and Marshalls.
Sure.
And Fenders were kind of passé. And I remember going to a store, it was called Red's Guitar Warehouse. It was in Santa Clara, California. And there was a salesman there, and he was going, you know, check this amp out. I forget what it was, like a Galley & Kruger. He goes, that's a great amp, and it's got channel switching, and it's got all this stuff. And I just said, you know, it doesn't sound like a guitar to me.
Right. After a while.
I mean, a guitar, to me, it sounds like a guitar through a Fender. But I love all kinds of Fender amps, and I play through a lot of different stuff. I mean, I'm kind of known for the Princeton, just because of I did this video.
Right.
You know, and I do love Princeton's, don't get me wrong.
Well, you have a whole bunch of them,
yes, I know. I ended up getting those when I just moved to New York, because I think I was, as I was saying, I was about 42, and I was just getting too lazy and tired to like carry around a Princeton, a Twin for sure, but a Vibrolux.
Right.
Which I do have. I love Vibroluxes. I played a Vibrolux on my first 3 records.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I really like, Vibroluxes have a little bit of, you know, you can really move some air.
Sure.
But the Princeton thing is great. And answering about the Telecaster, at some point, I can't remember when I did get a Tele.
Right.
And but the thing was, and the point I was going to make, and it took me forever to make it, sorry, is all my guitars, I always sounded like I was playing a Tele.
Right. No matter what you were playing.
No matter what I played. And I never, except for that, I think that Sunburst guitar, Les Paul, that I had a month, was a humbucking pickup. It's the only humbucking guitar I've ever owned.
That's wild.
So, yeah, you know, so it always sounded like a Tele to me. But then I finally got one.
Which it made all the difference, I assume.
You know, it was a bit of a struggle at first. And when I first got a Tele, I knew I loved Telecaster guitars. And Roy Buchanan had been my idol. James Burton I really liked. I mean, I just always really liked the sound of them. At the time, and I can't remember when it wasn't completely outrageous or anything, but it wasn't as fashionable.
Right.
You know, it was before Chrissie Hynde started playing one, and even that song Ohio, if you remember that.
Yeah. Sure.
Like that came out, and I remember hearing that and thinking, thank goodness, you know, because it was like a guitar sound that I could relate to.
Right.
And prior to that, I was given guitar lessons in a shopping center. I was young, I was older than you, but I was still young, you know, and a lot of the kids wanted to learn Randy Rhoads and stuff like that. And it was even before then, but finger tapping had happened, and I had this book, and I just couldn't relate to it, you know. I wish I could play it better, because I like some of it.
Do you like playing with distortion ever?
Oh yeah, I do more than you think.
More.
I mean, I really like the Red Muck pedal.
Right.
I used the Starlight pedal yesterday for a session I did, and the guy loved it.
That's great.
Yeah, and I brought Red Muck too. We put on Red Muck, and he was like, "That's good. I like it." He liked it a lot. Then I put on the Starlight. He got, "That sounds more like a guitar now." And I was like, "Okay." And I liked them both. I kind of like Red Muck actually, but yeah, I use distortion a lot. Well, more than you think. But anyway, yeah, at the time, and I love like Alan Holdsworth and people like that, right? You know, that have this really nice overdriven sound. But I was going to say, oh yeah, so I was showing finger tapping and all that stuff, and then that song Ohio came out, and I just saw the trend changing, and I thought, oh good, I'm not antiquated yet.
Sure.
You know, but it will happen.
No.
You never know.
I guess we'll see. That's interesting stuff. How old were you when you started writing your own music? And how has that changed, like your style of doing so?
What a good question.
Thank you.
You know,
I mean, I tried.
Because people don't, I mean, I generally don't get asked about writing and stuff like that. And I really take a lot of pride in, and I spend a lot of time on that. Now, and I just was listening to the first song I wrote as an instrumentalist, and yesterday, that's on my first record, Jim Campilongo and the 10-Gallon Cats, and it's called Blue Hen, and it's a really amazing little song. I was like, I can't believe, you know, it has like the kitchen sink and the damn thing, and I sent it to these guys in New York too, because I said, you know, I want to start doing these tunes again in a side project.
Right.
And I thought, I always loved that tune, and I went and listened to it yesterday. I was like, this song, I don't know if I'm that fast anymore, but I'll try it. But anyway, it started as kind of a challenge. And a woman I was going out with came in, and I was in my room practicing for the 6th hour that day. And at the time, I think I smoked. It was filled with smoke. And she said, what are you doing? I go, I booked this gig in a month, an instrumental thing, and I only know 2 instrumental songs. I'm trying to learn this other one, and it was like by the Texas Troubadours.
Right.
And she said, well, why don't you just write your own song? And I was like, well, I really love this material, and it comes from a certain era, and I really respect that part. You know, I love this music. And she said, well, I just don't think you can. And you know, it wasn't like mean, you know, she said it playfully, but I said, look, like, you come up with song titles, and I'll write a song for every song title. And she came back, and I have it somewhere. There was like 16 titles, and there were really good titles. One was Bully Cat, which ended up being on my first record. One was, and it was on my second record, Botro the Robot. You know, there were some pretty good titles, you know, and I mean, it took her about a minute. And so she had really given me the Pepsi challenge. So I said, okay, and there was one Pigpen.
Right.
And so I wrote this tune, and then I wrote another tune, and wrote another tune, and I I wrote about 9 tunes, and a lot of those tunes, Pigpen actually the name got changed to Blue Hen because that was the name of the label that put up the money, and they asked me to change the name.
Blue Hen.
And this is, it's the first instrumental I wrote. There's a lot in there. I think I could play it. Like I said, I was listening to it yesterday. Boy, I was fast back then. You know.
That'd be cool. Well, here, I would love to hear you try and play some Blue Hen.
I would love to try and play Blue Hen for you.
Great. Let's do it. Let's head over there.
Okay.
For that excellent rendition of Blue Hen off your first record.
I'm glad you liked it.
That was terrific. Thank you for that,
Thanks.
honestly. It was a pleasure sitting down with you. If you want to find out more about Jim, there's lessons and all kinds of music at jimcampilongo.com. And thank you very much for sitting down with us. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.